Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Hallper.
And I'm Mary Matte. Hey, everybody. Reminder, our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. And this week we have a really tremendous interview with Reverend Munther Ishaq. He is a Palestinian Christian theologian and a pastor in Bethlehem. And he is the one who gave that very famous sermon recently, saying that basically that Christmas in Palestine, the birthplace of Jesus, was canceled because of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So we're going to speak to him about that and a lot more.
Yeah, and he makes really important points about how kind of the existence of Christians in Palestine debunks the claim that the occupation is just a religious conflict between Muslims and Jews. Very grateful that he took time to talk to us. We are very excited to speak to Munther Ishaq. He is a Palestinian Christian theologian and pastor at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. He's the author of several books, including The Other Side of the Wall, a Palestinian Christian narrative of lament and hope. And as people may know, Christmas was canceled this year in Bethlehem, but Munther did deliver a liturgy of lament called Christ in the Rubble. And they also, in the nave of his church, they made a nativity scene with the baby Jesus wrapped in a traditional Palestinian keffiyeh scarf resting on top of a pile of rubble. And his liturgy went viral.
All right, let's go to Reverend Munther Ishaq.
Thank you so much for joining Munther Ishaq from Bethlehem. Please tell us what is happening right now as we speak in Bethlehem.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Katie. Since October 7th, Bethlehem has been under a very strict siege, like all the other cities and towns in the West Bank. Many exits or entrances of Bethlehem have been closed with blockades, not even a checkpoint, but completely blocking the road. Some checkpoints open in very limited hours for people to enter in and out. It's causing a lot of discomfort for many Palestinians who have to go on a daily basis to Jerusalem. And at the same time, many who used to work in Jerusalem, the very few who actually had a permit from the Israeli military to work in Jerusalem have lost their jobs since then. This year has also witnessed an unprecedented number of insurgents into Bethlehem, especially into the refugee camps, Dheisha, Azza, Waida. And many young Palestinians have been killed in these incursions. And around us in the remote villages, as you all have heard, an increased number of settler attacks on isolated villagers. It's really becoming scary to travel outside of the cities, not just Bethlehem. As you know, in the West Bank, everything is fragmented. And to go from where I am in Bethlehem, for example, to Ramallah, we have to go through roads that are controlled by Israel, by the Israeli military or the settlers. And it's not always safe. And we're trying to avoid these trips. So it's been very complicated since October 7th, but even throughout the year since, to be honest, this new government, not new anymore. Having said all of this, this feels nothing in comparison to what's happening in Gaza, unfortunately. I feel even bad just talking about it because right now in Gaza, as you all know, it's horrible.
You delivered a liturgy of lament called Christ in the Rubble, and we're going to play an excerpt from that.
Gaza today has become the moral compass of the world. Gaza was hell before October 7th, and the world was silent. Should we be surprised that there's silence now? If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. And if we as Christians are not outraged by the genocide, by the weaponization of the Bible to justify it, there is something wrong with our Christian witness, and we are compromising the credibility of our gospel message. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace. Some have not even called for a ceasefire. I'm talking about churches. I feel sorry for you. We will be okay. Despite the immense blow we have endured, we, the Palestinians, will recover. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians. Although this is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received in a long time, but we will be okay. But for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this?
So what inspired you to deliver that liturgy, and also what has the response been like?
I think my first words of that sermon summarize everything. We're angry. We're angry and broken. Angry because this is no longer a quote-unquote response, as they try to convince us it is. This has been going now for almost 86, 87 days, non-stop killing of civilians and children, destruction of everything in Gaza. I think the Israeli leaders told us what they were going to do, and they did it. They were going to destroy Gaza completely. They looked at all Palestinians in Gaza and said there are no innocent civilians. Everybody is a target. And we've seen this happening. And the images we see are horrifying, are literally horrifying. We receive lots of images on our social media from the courageous journalists who are risking everything to broadcast the genocide of Gaza. Like the people of Gaza are broadcasting their genocide on air, And we're horrified. We're horrified by the images. And it's not as if, as I said, it's one incident, it's a response 1 week, 2 weeks. It's been going for 3 months now almost. And the world continued to justify it. And I think now the world got used to it. So the idea that world leaders justify the killing of our children, rationalize it, even give theology to support it, provide the theological cover just as they did with the political cover, have not called for a ceasefire. And now I think the world has become numb to it. It's no longer news, 400 were killed today. Okay, 300 were killed today. To us, this is, it makes us angry how the world is reacting to an ongoing genocide. Again, this has not happened within a frame of 2 weeks where there was a fierce battle and people were killed. This is ongoing. We can stop it if we have the will, but it seems no one has the will. It seems the world does not look at Palestinians as equals. And I just wanted to let my frustration out. I think I'm also personally too tired of church leaders who are too soft, too kind, hiding beyond the idea of neutrality and praying for peace. I don't think as faith leaders, this is our calling in a world that is full of so much darkness. I think we have to speak for those without a voice, for the powerless, for the oppressed. And this is why I said this message for the people of Gaza, to speak for them, especially in a time when so much attention was on Bethlehem because of the cancellation of the celebrations of Christmas. But I also wanted to speak to the Christian world, being a Christian myself and a Christian leader in Bethlehem, that you have to speak. You can't continue to be silent. And actually, with some of them, as I said, it's already too late. I don't want you to speak. You've been complicit, and any words of discomfort now and you're troubled and all that, we're not going to buy that. I'm sorry. It's on you, as I said. I never expected this sermon to receive this much attention. I'm grateful for those who amplified our voice, to begin with the American Christian organizations, many of them actually evangelicals, who said, we're troubled by our own community's complicity in this. We want you to speak to our community. So this was the original idea. And from then it went viral, and I'm grateful for that. I think it showed a different face to the Palestinians. Many did not know Palestinian Christians exist. I think it challenged the narrative that this is a religious conflict. I think, to me, this is a very powerful idea. I mean, we have to challenge the narrative, the dominant narrative, that this is a religious conflict. To have a Christian leader in Christmas talk on Christ under the rubble, Christ in solidarity with the children of Gaza. I think that shocked many people around the world, and still, they're thinking. It might be too late to stop what's happening in Gaza, but at least people are now aware that something is radically wrong and something must change. I hope so. It's been overwhelming, to be honest, the response. But this is our responsibility as faith leaders. This is my responsibility as a pastor to speak up, and we've done it. And I'm grateful for the response.
I know that you were recently in the US, and Washington is full of politicians who claim that they're Christian, claim to love Jesus. What was the response that you got when you tried to appeal to some of these people during your trip to Washington?
It's not only that they love, they are Christians and claim to be always, churchgoers and Christians, but they also claim that they support the Christians of the Middle East. And to me, this is a big problem. I mean, we will we can differ on which brand of Christianity we adopt, and there are conservatives, there are liberals, there are mainline, there are evangelicals, and we don't look alike, I know. But at least don't claim to care for me and then totally ignore my perspective and positions and actually continue to dismiss me as if we don't exist. It's been disheartening, to be honest, very disheartening, because here I am carrying a letter signed by church leaders in Bethlehem, all the churches in Bethlehem, the Orthodox, the Catholics, the Armenians, the Syrians, the Protestants. We all signed the letter. And I thought at least this, would draw at least attention, sympathy. They were courteous, especially the Republicans. But they were clear, this war must continue. And what I could not get is their insistence that they care for religious liberty and for the future of Christians in the Middle East, when they know too well that this war, for example, will bring an end to one of the longest Christian traditions in the Middle East, in Gaza. And I think, Aaron, to be honest, that many American Christians have this idea of American nationalism. Embedded in it is support to Israel and alliance to Israel. Maybe it's the American Christian nationalism to some. And their alliance and identity as aligned with Israel trumps even their allegiance to Middle Eastern Christians or to anything else. I think when someone like Mike Johnson says openly, as Christians, the Bible tells us to support Israel. I mean, I want to ask, just like that, what if Israel commits war crimes? Are you supposed to support Israel nevertheless, regardless? And it seems that this is the attitude. Israel can do no wrong. And at best, they get a small, slap on the hand. But God tells us to support Israel. We have to support Israel. And as I said, it's part of this Christian identity that they feel America has. And to them, it trumps everything else, even forceful justice, even, to the extent of dehumanizing Palestinians. I mean, how are you not appalled with 9,000 children killed in 3 months? It's unprecedented numbers. And it's not just killed in any way. Do you see the pictures of children crying out? I mean, weeping in the hospitals, burnt out completely, losing their parents. It's horrifying. It's traumatizing, to be honest. And we can't just ignore and go numb and ignore these things. But it seems to many they don't want even to see or to watch.
We know that they've been performing amputations without anesthesia, which is I don't know how people can sleep at night knowing that that's happening.
The whole world is not able to convince Israel to bring the needed humanitarian support to the hospitals, at least, or food. It's heartbreaking to see how people of Gaza run behind the trucks of food because, they're starving, literally starving. I am in touch with the Christians in the churches in Gaza. And so far, in the church itself, we've lost 3 people from sickness. They just die because there's no medicine, no hospitals. I mean, if you get sick right now in Gaza, chances are very high that you will not survive. We're receiving pictures and reports of dead bodies in the streets, and sorry to say, animals eating these dead bodies. And then, the operations without anesthesia. I know someone who did this, the aunt of a good friend of mine, and we're just horrified to think of the idea. try to imagine being the person who had to go through this surgery. When I say it's hell on earth, it is hell on earth. And sadly, it's been hell on earth even before October 7. But now this is, I don't know if there are levels to hell, but this is horrifying.
And this aunt is someone who had the surgery or performed it or underwent it?
She underwent it, yes. It's horrible. I mean, she had to, she was hit when the church, the Orthodox church building collapsed from bombing. And she had to do hip replacement surgery, something in her hips. I mean, the amount of pain is horrible. The pictures we see from those in the church, I mean, they don't look the same.
And can you tell us about the Christian community in Gaza? I believe there are 3 churches in Gaza. 2 of them, at least, have been attacked during this Israeli genocide campaign, including the Greek Orthodox Church, which was bombed. And I believe the other church is where an Israeli sniper killed two people, a woman and a girl, I think.
Yeah. A woman and her daughter were killed in the vicinity
of the Holy Family Church.
Yes, the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
The Baptist Church is a small church, but it was also damaged severely from the bombing next to it, at least. But it was damaged. And the Catholic Church buildings were damaged. There is also a cultural center for the Orthodox Church that is brand new with a theater for arts and exhibitions, and that was just constructed and opened I think last year. That was completely total level to the ground. Israel is killing everything. I mean, destroying everything. Cultural centers, schools, universities. When people begin talking about the hour after the war ends and what happens the day after the war ends, I think it's going to take years or months to just remove the rubble. And then there is no infrastructure. And Israel is clear. They don't want people to live in Gaza anymore. And the world seems to be watching, and we're seeing. The Christian community in Gaza, you've asked, is now most of it is either in the Catholic Church, the majority, and some are still in the Orthodox Church despite the attack. They live in trauma, they live in fear, because they know it's not safe, and they know that they are not protected, that anything could happen at any moment. 2 days ago, a friend of mine there sent me a picture of a bullet that hit, he said, next to his head. He don't know where it came from. So to live in constant fear that your life could end at any moment, I can't even imagine that. And then very, very little food. The psychological impact of knowing that your homes are destroyed. Most of the homes of the Christian community, they told us, have been destroyed either partially or completely. So they're hoping to survive, but then they don't know what they're going to do. They've made the conscious decision not to go to the south. They are among the few who decided to remain in the city center of Gaza despite the battles around them. One of them told me, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die in the church and not go to the unknown. Others say, we don't want to end up in Sinai. At least here, we're together, and if something happens to us, it happens to us together. So they're taking a very, very resilient stand, very courageous stand, but they're living in unbearable human circumstances, in the most difficult, possible circumstances.
We have a clip, speaking of Christians in Gaza, there's a clip of Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Nahum, being asked about the snipers shooting and killing of the woman and her daughter. Let's take a look at this and what Fleur Nahum says.
If a ceasefire means the return of the hostages and the dismantlement of a genocidal regime that has stated that they're going to attack us again, then everybody would be in favor of a ceasefire. But if a ceasefire means that we're just going to keep them quiet for a bit until they attack again, then it's Israel's obligation to defend its citizens and destroy that threat, don't you think?
Why is it necessary, it is reported, to start shooting, having snipers outside a church?
I saw the reports this morning. The church, there are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the report is talking
there's
about.
a Catholic church in there, isn't there? That is.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are no Christians because they were driven out by Hamas.
Respectfully, there are Christians, because I spoke to an MP yesterday who has family members in the church who are Christians.
Well, I don't know
Unless you're
what
telling me
happened.
she's
I don't know
wrong.
who was attacked. I didn't see the report.
Yeah, I don't know if she's deceitful or ignorant, and I don't know which one is worse, to be honest. We've been saying it for years that it serves the Zionist agenda, the Zionist narrative, to promote the conflict as a religious one. And that's why I think our mere existence as Palestinian Christians troubles them, as we continue to insist that this is not a religious conflict. But how can you not know that there are Christians in Gaza? Honestly, how can you not know about one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world that had produced so much of the Christian history is related actually to Gaza, from biblical times to today, to the medieval times when there were poets and philosophers, and that we still study their literature from Gaza. How can you not know, or how can you, even if you knew and eliminate that, it's even more evil. But notice how she said Hamas eliminated. Again, that's the main point. That's the main point, to say we're fighting Hamas and Hamas fights Christians and they're coming next to you in America or in England. That's the main point. The idea of demonizing all Palestinians and promoting the narrative that Christians are persecuted in the Middle East and in Palestine. And if people really care, they would listen to us. We will tell you how we're doing. Things might not have been ideal under Hamas for the Christians. I mean, to be honest, they were not ideal. But Christians were not killed or driven out on purpose systematically from Gaza because of Hamas or by Hamas. Christians who left Gaza in the last 16 years have left because of the siege. If there was the opportunity for them to go back and forth to their homes, they would. I know, they're my friends. But it serves a purpose to say that Muslims drive them out. We've heard this all the time, by the way, in Bethlehem, that, look at the percentage of Christians, how it declined in Bethlehem because of the Palestinian Authority. No, it's not because of the Palestinian Authority. It's because we live under an apartheid system. It's impossible to thrive as a community under an apartheid system. It's impossible to thrive when you have to be stopped at the checkpoint, leaving Bethlehem to go to Ramallah, and now entering Ramallah. If people just walk in our shoes for one day and understand what it means to live under occupation and apartheid, you will understand why people are leaving and why it's so hard for anybody to build a future here or to survive here. It's to be honest, it's despicable to be used in such a way to promote a certain narrative. And again, if people really are concerned about the Christian community, I suggest by talking to us first, and we will tell you what our problem is. We will tell you what the challenges are, and don't try to promote that we're driven out by whatever it's Palestinian Authority or Hamas.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way that people love to say that Hamas is like ISIS, because they want to, as you said, create this fear that there's this transnational internationalist project and that they're targeting Christians or Muslims who aren't, or tech theorists.
Yeah, I think every empire needs the axis of evil to survive, to promote itself as the axis of good. For a while, it was the communists. Now it is Islam, Hamas. It's the constant demonization of Palestinians. It's beyond the dehumanization of us. I call it the mentality of walls. And I've been saying this for even long before October 7th. If you want to understand how the world is okay with the siege in Gaza, which, how is the world, how was the world fine with that? I'm talking about before October 7th. It's because this idea of walls, first you separate, you disengage, then you dehumanize, you demonize, you create fear, and then you even justify their bombing, and then you blame them for it. And this is how the world was okay with the siege on all 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza they brought it on themselves. They told us, it's this, and the whole idea that they elected Hamas. I mean, have some integrity at least in reporting and tell what happened. When it happened and how it happened and who voted and what happened then, and how can you blame those now who were not even born, many of them, when this happened on Hamas. And the way people talk about Palestinians is so disheartening.
Another thing that we've seen that's kind of a pathetic, I think, excuse or defense of Israel is that, well, Hamas is responsible for everything that happened because everything that Israel is doing is because of what Hamas did on October 7th.
No, we've seen two things. So first, the isolation of October 7th, as they isolate that incident, make all the focus on what happened October 7th. It's horrifying what happened on October 7th. I cannot justify or accept the killing of children and families in their homes and the kidnapping of children, noting that Palestinian children have been kidnapped for a long time and no one cares because, that's the sad point. But singling out or isolating October 7th apart from a context of 75 years of oppression is part of that narrative that gives the cover for this genocide. This war did not start in October 7th. We have to be clear about this. This is about the 75 years of oppression, and it continues. The people of Gaza are refugees, 70% of them. In other words, the state of Israel was built on the ruins of the towns and villages of the very same people of Gaza. How did we forget this? How was this ignored in every, I can't understand how people always isolate October 7th, begin from it, and the idea of October 7th serves another important tool, which is making Israel the victim. And so now it's the colonizers who are the victim defending themselves. Israel has the right to defend itself. So, the colonizer now has the right to defend itself from the colonizer. And everyone seems okay with it. Yeah, everyone is fine. And, one church leader after the other, one political leader, from the superpowers, came to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem the week after October 7th. And they all repeated this, including many church leaders. And who's the colonizer and who's the colonized? The idea of Israel has the right to defend itself. All these rhetorics, I think, many times are repeated and they frame the discussion in a way that makes the Palestinians always on the wrong. Even the idea of Hamas taking Palestinians as human shields, which, a very popular thing right now. You think of it, and and I told this to some of the journalists who came to Bethlehem to see me after the manger we created, and I said, and they've asked me about this, and I said, if a serial killer, let's say in Tennessee, a very, very neutral serial killer, he's really bad, and he runs from the police, goes to a school of your children and kidnaps all these children, would you bomb the school just to kill that serial killer? Really? Would you justify that? And I say you would only do it in one case, if those were not children but animals. And I know it's strong language, but this is how we view the world talking about us. When they use the idea that it's Hamas's fault for using Palestinians as human shields. So much of this this genocide and this war that's happening right now has to do with the narrative and framing it, and I want to, I think we need to do our best in challenging that narrative.
And you've said that this is not a religious conflict. So what is this conflict or occupation? What is this really about?
Settler colonialism. I mean, come on. 75 years ago, we were in our homes, we were in our towns, we were in our villages, and Zionists came from Europe with the idea not just to find home with us. I mean, let's be clear. The idea was to expel us and take our land and establish a home for the Jewish people on historic Palestine. That's why I call it settler colonialism. They colonized our land, they kicked us out and settled in our place. this is how it started. We have to deal with the conflict as is. It's not a conflict. Framing it as a conflict gives the impression that there are two people in the same land fighting over disputed areas. This is not the case. Not only there are not two unequal systems here or structures. One country has been literally dominating the other and controlling every aspect of our life. When we talk about apartheid, we're talking about how Israel controls everything and have placed rules and regulations and restrictions on everything we do as Palestinians, from where we live, whether we can get water or not. We can't even, I can't even dig for water as Palestinians, this. The network systems, the electricity, the water, where we can build. We cannot build on the majority of the West Bank now. The roads we can drive at. The family registration system. I have friends who are not able to unite, and family members who are not able to unite. Friends who are not able to unite with their spouses because Israel controls the family registration system and would not allow the spouses to come here, even on a spousal visa. This is how cruel the system is. They control everything. Don't get the impression that we have a state or we have sovereignty or independence as Palestinians. We live under the mercy of Israel in everything we do. I always use the metaphor because I speak a lot to church leaders and I say, I'm tired of the language of peace and praying for reconciliation because it gives the impression there are two men fighting. I use this metaphor. We don't have two men fighting. We have one man literally stepping on the throat of the other and you lecturing the person who's on the ground about peace. This is the language we have. And again, these are all the things we've been talking about before October 7th. And now we see it repeated, but on a horrifying scale, unfortunately, and tragically.
I'm wondering your response to Israeli leaders like Netanyahu. They've invoked the Bible, passages from the Bible, to justify the genocide. Netanyahu talking about Amalek and how in the Bible, basically, I believe it's King Saul who says we have to wipe out Amalek, and Netanyahu is basically invoking a similar argument. I'm wondering your response to that, and also, what teachings from the Bible, what teachings of Jesus you've turned to make sense of this time?
Let me say several things. First, to me as a Christian, it's very troubling because this is my Bible as well. So we're seeing the weaponizing, not just the weaponizing of a religious text, the weaponizing of our own religious text against us, sending the message that God is against us, that God is a tribal God who favors and privileges nations over the other. So as a Christian, I am appalled by this. But I also want to draw attention to the ultimate hypocrisy of the world, because when Muslim leaders invoked religious language, everyone goes crazy and called them back-minded and
theocrats.
Yeah, but everyone is fine with Israel using the language, and Christians are using the same language. Christian Zionists use the very same language. Actually, that Amalekite usage, actually Christian Zionists in Jerusalem used it before Netanyahu. A good friend of mine was joking that this is plagiarism from Netanyahu. So I can't understand, again, the idea of weaponizing God, but also weaponizing the Bible, but making God a tribal God and a God of war who takes sides based on ethnicities or religion. Or this is not the God I meet in the Bible. And this is not our calling, and this is not how religious texts should be used. They should be used to bring us closer together. You've asked me what religious text I've used from the teachings of Jesus. Let me begin with the Hebrew scripture itself. It's loaded. It's loaded with scripture that talks about justice, that talks about equality, that talks about defending the oppressed, that talks about eliminating any boundaries, ethnic boundaries, or even religious boundaries. The prophets were so radical in many ways when they talked about the idea of the temple being a house of nations to all people. That's in Isaiah. And even Ezekiel talked about allotting the land to you and the stranger, they should be to you as the native born. You know, the idea that the Bible or the Hebrew scripture is an exclusive text and so on, we have to actually challenge that and realize the multiplicity of voices within the Hebrew scripture itself. And if anything, let's choose the texts that talk about justice, about the mercy of God, about care for the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, the strangers, about the defending the oppressed and being a voice to the voiceless. And as a Christian, I see Jesus embodying this spirit. I don't think Jesus came with something as if completely new. I think Jesus falls within that prophetic tradition of the Hebrew scriptures. He told us to be thirsty for justice and righteousness. He said, blessed are the peacemaker, blessed are the merciful, blessed are those who are thirsty for justice, righteousness, and truth. This is our calling as Christians. I think Jesus in his life embodied that by prioritizing the marginalized in his ministry. And this led to me saying that if Jesus was born today, he would be born in Gaza under the rubble as a sign of solidarity with the oppressed, with the marginalized. When Jesus was born, I don't think it's in the gospel, and I don't think it is in the gospel, but I don't think it's a coincidence that he was born in a time of occupation, and that they survived a massacre to children, and then they became refugees. I mean, look at that. To us as Christians, the Son of God, when he came to our land, became a refugee, was displaced, survived a massacre. I mean, if anything, this is the ultimate sign of solidarity. This is the teachings of Jesus that I hope people see, the God who cares, who's in compassion, who's in solidarity even with those who are oppressed. And, you know, I've used a lot the text from the Gospels in Matthew, in which, and by the way, this message that Jesus gave about, I was hungry and you give me food, I was thirsty and you gave me water. As I said, a lot of it is actually found in the Hebrew scripture. Look at Isaiah's teaching about fasting and what is accepted. What is an accepted fasting? And he said, none of what you're doing is fine to me. You have to care for the widow. You have to do justice. I think to me, Jesus takes it to another step when he says, whatever you have done to any one of those little ones, you have done to me. When you visit a prisoner, you have visited me. When you feed someone who's hungry, you do it to me. To me, this became a very powerful image, because bringing it back to what's happening in Gaza, the children of Gaza have been through a lot. And maybe on top of that, you have this dehumanization of those children. And I said, Jesus says, whatever you do to them, you do to me. And to me, this is the ultimate, giving them dignity, elevating them into a very high status. And I think this is the role of religious leaders, to stand with the oppressed. And I continue to say, a lot of what I'm doing, or if not most of it, is motivated from my faith convictions. This is, I'm a person of faith, and I'm a follower of Jesus. This is why I'm doing these things. Of course, I'm a Palestinian and I care for my people, and this is home to me, and I'm very, very rooted here. Those who know me know this about me, but at the end of the day, this is about our calling as people of faith, and precisely my calling as a Christian. And this is why I continue to speak these things and to do the things that I do with my colleagues here.
There's a priest, an American priest, who made a similar point about Jesus, who actually appeared on CNN.
The story of Christmas is about a Palestinian Jew. Now, how often do you find those words put together? A Palestinian Jew born into a time when his country was occupied, right? They can't find a place for her to even give birth, his mother. They're homeless. They eventually have to flee as refugees into Egypt, no less. I mean, you can't make up the parallels to our current world situation right now.
And of course, there's a major backlash to this, but it's pretty indisputable.
It's hard to look at it in any other way, to be honest. When people ask about the manger, Jesus under the rubble, I say that the connection was very, very natural to us. This is a very relevant story for all Palestinians today. And I think that the idea that there was a backlash for this, and I think AOC, I can't say her full name, also received backlash for saying something similar. And I say, have you read the Gospels? What did I miss? How did Christmas change from the idea as what we've heard and what I've said? Jesus born in time of, in the Gospel of Luke, the introduction to the Christmas narrative begins with the census that Caesar made, which forced the Virgin Mary and Joseph, to the Holy Family, to relocate from, travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem for registration. This is the backdrop of the story. A decree by an empire for census, for control, for taxation. To me, as a Palestinian, again, this is a very relevant experience. The magnetic card system that Israel used to control us, to make sure they know where every person is. And believe it or not, I cannot do it now any other. If I live in Bethlehem, there's a place to do it. If I live in Jericho, there's a place to do it. So the connection is very natural. The massacre during Herod's time, the family becoming refugees in Egypt, everything in that narrative points to this idea that Jesus was born in very difficult circumstances. And then the idea that the gospel writers dare to call for peace, and the message, glory to God and higher, peace on earth. It's a challenge to the ways of the empire. It's a challenge to the ideals of the world, which believe in power and in control. And here is the child. In him we are supposed to find peace, in his meekness and his humility, because these were the words of Jesus. Yet somehow all of this became the romantic family in snow, in a very cozy manger with decorations and lights. And I say, where did you get this? Where did you get the idea that it was a silent night? If anything, it was a night of trouble and tribulations and tiredness, and it was not silent. It was noisy with the sound of the occupiers and the agony of labor, and then the children crying and running for your life to Egypt and being displaced and try to build your home, your life there, and all of that. I think we need to challenge, and I continue to do this, the comfort and peace image many Christians in the West have portrayed the Christmas narrative with.
And speaking of Christianity, can you talk about the role and history of Christian Zionism?
Christian Zionism is an important phenomenon to discuss, of course, and it's hard to pin a beginning of Christian Zionism, other than to say it's most likely, most scholars go back to the early 17th century with some sort of an emergence of interest in the Hebrew scriptures by many Protestant leaders. But at the same time, as they began reading the Hebrew scriptures, they began linking what was said to the Jewish communities among them in Europe. And the relationship between Christians and Jews in Europe have always been complicated. There has been prejudice, racism, and then which translated, of course, into the hateful anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust. But at the heart of that relationship is the idea that, can we coexist? Can Jews actually find a home in Europe? And many Protestant Christians realize that that can't happen. The only hope Jews have, so the solution to the so-called Jewish problem, is for Jews to convert to Christianity. And for that to happen, they have to go first to Palestine. So this was the idea. And this developed into the idea of the restoration of the Jewish people, into prophecies, predictions about their restoration, and linking that restoration to the Jews gathering first in Palestine. This line of thinking was very strong in the British Empire. And when England controlled Palestine or occupied Palestine, this was one of the motivations behind the Balfour Declaration. And, so they looked at the Jews and they said, first of all, they can be useful to us as an empire in the Middle East. And sorry to put it this way, they can do the dirty work for us. And second, we solve the problem. They leave Europe. And finally, maybe they believe in Christ. Some of this phenomena then developed among fundamentalist evangelicals into a system of things, or a line of things that need to happen in the end times before the return of Christ. And the gathering of Jews in Palestine was viewed as a sign that the second coming is so near. There was almost an obsession with end-time prophecy. And in that end-time prophecy, they looked at Jews, but certainly at others, as players in a drama, in a puzzle, pieces in a puzzle, devoid of any human compassion to what might happen. Many of the Christian Zionists you meet in the United States, especially among evangelicals, have promote an idea of the end times in which, after the gathering of Jews in Palestine and before the return of Christ, 2/3 of the Jews will be massacred, and then the other third will convert to Christianity. Somehow that's a Jewish-friendly theology. I mean, go figure. Christian Zionists, then, more than anything, we need to see it as a political movement, because in the United States, it has political leverage. In the evangelical identity today, many people think it's all about, for example, abortion, but part of the evangelical identity today is support to Israel for various reasons, including the ones I mentioned, their role in God's plan. God has a special plan for them. And part of it is, American nationalism and our relationship with, we are a Christian nation, they are the Jewish nation. The Bible comes together in such a powerful way, even if it means that there will be another massacre and another Holocaust, and then the conversion to Christianity happens, the belief in Christ. They would say they will come to faith in Christ. I use conversion to Christianity because I want to show the hypocrisy. Because to many of these Christian Zionists who claim they love the Jewish people, they believe 2/3 will be killed and the other third will cease to become Jewish, to be Jewish, by becoming Christian. Today, Christian Zionists in America have a strong political leverage. When Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, he said, "I did it for the evangelicals." One organization alone, I forgot the name, over 20 years raised $1.4 billion, billion, not million, from evangelical churches to the state of Israel, most of it to projects and settlements and to the Israeli military. I mean, think of that. We need to pause and think of that. This is money coming from evangelicals, not for peace causes or multi-faith gatherings, or to advocate coexistence, or to build schools or hospitals. It's gone for settlements and the military, a lot of it. And this is, imagine myself as a Palestinian when I hear these things, or as a Palestinian Christian. Christian Zionism today also is very strong in other places in the global south, including Brazil, including Nigeria. And it's aligned with, populism, nationalism. We see countries that vote or shift to the right have strong Christian Zionist tendencies. As I said, Brazil is the obvious example. And a lot of it is also filled with this idea of culture of civilization and viewing, if you have a problem with Muslims in your country, then immediately you support Christian Zionism. A lot of these leaders we meet have, they're very ignorant, but at the same time, they're very arrogant. They tell us what should happen, what will happen, who's right and who's wrong, even though, as I said, they're very ignorant. And it continues to be an influential movement in our world today. In this war, they were among the first to speak and support the war. giving it theological reasons, biblical reasons. One megachurch pastor even said we need to turn Gaza into a parking lot. It's hard for me as a pastor to understand that another pastor says these words. A follower of Christ asking, and saying it's okay to have a complete genocide. It's unbelievable. This is, Christian Zionism, and as Palestinian Christians, we have and continue to challenge them. We organize conferences. I lead a movement called Christ at the Checkpoint. The main goal of this movement, one of the main goals, is to challenge the theology and attitudes of Christian Zionism, who, as I said, continue to be a very influential movement in our world today. And many American politicians and leaders are actually openly Christian Zionists.
Like Michael Johnson, who you brought up earlier. And can you share what kind of interactions you had when you were in the United States, and also what you were doing in the United States on your recent trip?
So this would not have been the first time. We do a lot of these advocacy tours, raising awareness about what's happening on the ground, giving life testimonies, challenging leaders and church leaders to humanize the conflict. The last trip was very short, with the intention of asking for a ceasefire. We met with staff of many congressmen and senators. We've done more than 25 meetings in 2 days. So it was like 30 minutes every meeting, presenting the case that as Christian leaders in Bethlehem, we want this war to end before Christmas. I mean, to think that how naive we were to think that maybe we could impact an end of the war before Christmas. And now we hear that they're not even close, because, what's the goal of this war anyways? We highlighted stories from the ground of what's happening, basically to challenge the narrative back then that it was all targeted bombing and that Israel is doing its best to avoid killing civilians, and if anything, it's Hamas' fault for putting their infrastructure and hiding behind the civilians. There were also, we met with the senators who were actually supportive, especially from the Democratic Party, who called for a ceasefire. I forgot the names. I'm not good in names, but we've had a couple of meetings with senators who were very, very supportive, their staff, of course. And we've had numerous meetings with staff of congressmen and senators who actually told us the war must continue. And they were not just very blunt, but they were, in some cases showed zero empathy with what's happening. There were some back and forth arguments in some cases. Our meetings at the State Departments and at the White House confirmed to me that those who work in the in the government, in the State Department, for example, or those involved and know about the war, and they actually know. And they would give us hints that they know what's happening and that they feel powerless. And that's a sense I get most of the time I go to the State Department. I think I've been there 3 or 4 times. I can't remember. But it's the idea that they know what's happening, and they know whose fault it is. And when I go, for example, when we raise awareness in the Congress, actually we're raising awareness. They don't know, they're clueless, but they have positions, of course, they vote. But in the State Department, they actually know every single detail. They know too much. And that troubles me, because you still know, but you act in such a way. So this was more or less the experience.
And last questions from me. I know that you have 2 children. I was wondering how old they were and how you explain what is happening to them. And then, speaking of children, I know that you mentioned, I read part of your book, The Other Side of the Wall, and you talk about being slapped by an Israeli soldier, I believe, at the age of 11. I wanted to know what that was like, how formative an experience that was.
My children are 11 and 9, and raising children here is a challenge in itself. Before the war and now with the war, it's hard. It's really hard. And what we're trying to tell them, we try as best not to expose them to difficult images because I know it's traumatizing. We try to give simple answers, and we try to encourage them to pray for the children in Gaza and to think of others. I think this is the thing we're trying to do the most to our children right now. But overall, it's hard. It's really hard because we always get questions at checkpoints. Why is this happening? I didn't try everything, but one time, we were sent back at the checkpoint, and the soldier was not very polite with us. And to me, as a father, to have someone shout in a rude way in front of my children, it's really, demoralizing. To me, the biggest challenge growing up was how to battle hate and how to fight this idea that we need to seek revenge. Every Palestinian have a story. Because the checkpoints are part of our lives right now, sadly. And checkpoint experiences is so dehumanizing. These experiences can take you down, lead you to hatred and revenge, can lead you to despair and leave and immigrate. And to many of us, lead us to resist. And I have chosen to resist nonviolently. I'm convinced of that path as a Christian, but also strategically, I think it works best, especially since I want a future in which we have to share this land with the Jews somehow. I don't see any other way. The alternative is one of us, expel the other or kill the other. It's horrifying. Even talking about it is horrifying. And right now, it seems all the years I've devoted to promoting this idea of sharing the land seems, to be honest, a waste of time. And I don't know how I'm going to talk about it again. But once we recover from our wounds, I think we have to go back to this idea. Because, as I said, it seems to me that the alternatives are very basic, despair and isolate and grieve, or violence and hatred and resentment, or resistance. And we have to resist. As Palestinians, I think those of us here are very resilient. And I want my kids to be resilient, but not to hate. This is the challenge. And I accept this challenge because I don't want the alternative. And we've seen the result of the alternative right now in our land. It's devastating. And I must admit that one of the most difficult things in this war is for me as a father to see a father holding his child or kissing the feet of his child from under the white, when they're coffin. It's hard, but we can't give in. And this is our land. I don't want to go, any other word. And I don't want to the other routes that I explained. And to me, this way of resisting non-violently, humanizing the other, is the only way for us forward.
Reverend Ishaq, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Very grateful to Reverend Ishaq for joining us. Very powerful when he talks about how he feels almost bad discussing the plight of Palestinians in the West Bank because of the genocide in Gaza. It really brings home just what a historical monstrosity this whole thing is, that, even as the West Bank is being besieged, terrorized, there are raids by Israel, checkpoints, daily terror, killings, every horror imaginable. The people there feel bad speaking about it because of the genocide going on in Gaza.
And his work is so important, especially as so many religious leaders remain silent or even encourage this. It's so important to have people of faith actually talk about faith in a way that is pro-human being and not pro-genocide.
Yeah, the way Israel and the US use faith and religion is to justify all these policies that violate everything that their religious leaders taught. Jesus taught peace. And it's one of many just unspeakable ironies of this whole situation that in the name of the teachings of peace, people are justifying genocide. And his experience of going to Washington and trying to speak to people and getting the cold shoulder, this reverend from the birthplace of Jesus can't even get an audience, a fair hearing in Washington, which is filled with people who claim to love Jesus, love the Bible.
And love Christians, as he pointed out, and love Christians in the Middle East. Yeah. And, it is, as he mentioned, if you are Muslim and you use religion to justify policies, you're slammed as a theocrat, as backwards. But if you do it to justify Zionism, it's A-okay. You can be Speaker of the House, for instance.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we are at usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at usefulidiots.podcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.